Boom. Okay. So before we get started, I just want to make sure you're set up for your optimal viewing experience. If you haven't already done so, you should set your screen to gallery view. And if you see the words up toward the top of your screen that says speaker view, you're already in gallery view. So that's the first step you want to take to reach that optimal viewing experience. The next step you want to take is to hide non-video participants. And so if you haven't hidden non-video participants and you are in gallery view, you should see a whole bunch of boxes, most of them black with names on them. Hover over any of those little boxes and a blue button with 3 dots will appear in the upper right-hand corner of that box next to a button that says mute. And then click on that little button and you should see a drop-down menu. And in that drop-down menu toward the bottom, you should see something that says hide non-video participants. And so when you click that, you should only be able to see people whose videos are on, their cameras are on. And so that will be just the actors during this performance. Please, during the performance, keep your mics off, if at all possible. Well, it is possible, and your video feeds off. The program has been uploaded to the chat box, so if you'd like to see who's worked on the show, you can look in the chat box for that and open up the program. We will be having one 5-minute intermission during the show. And then after the reading's over, we will have a short talk back with the playwright and the rest of the creative team about the play and the process. So now I'm going to turn it over to Professor Tim Slover, and that is all I'm going to say. Tim, take it away.
Hi, let me echo my colleague and friend Sydney Chico Donnell's welcome to you for this last of our readings of the 5 in New Plays Workshop. I want to tell you a little bit about the workshop and why we do it. Plays are collaborative once they leave the page and get onto the stage. It takes lots of people to create a theatrical text, which really only exists in a playing space and not on the page. So what we try to do in the New Plays Workshop is take the 14-week semester and take plays that are already very good and already have finished drafts and give those playwrights the experience of working with very talented people who come from our actor training program and music theater program and stage management program and theater studies program. And those people all put the play on its feet after some roundtable reading and discussion. That last part, putting the play on its feet, has been quite challenging for the last part of this semester, but we've done what we can. I'm very proud of all of the students in this class. So that's what it's about. I have to pay tribute here also to Sydney. Sydney is a dramaturg, as you know, and as a dramaturg, she brings essential kind of analysis to new plays. So it's great to have her there. But it turns out she's also very technically savvy. Had it just been me, I don't know whether these would have ever happened. But luckily, she's a savant of canvas. And so it's worked out very well. And you'll see that as we go on tonight. Well, this play is a verbatim play. I want to tell you a little bit about that. Verbatim theater, that is theater that uses the actual words of real people in the context of a real event, has a long and distinguished history. A play called Arden of Faversham, an Elizabethan play of 1592, some of which was probably written by Shakespeare, told the true story of a murder. And it used the real names of those involved, and it drew on a broadside, like a newspaper, account for its dialogue. Fast forwarding a few centuries, in the 1930s, here in America, the Federal Theater Project produced plays called The Living Newspaper. Each of these plays was about a social or a political issue. For example, 1/3 of a Nation was about substandard housing, and dialogue was drawn from a kind of collage of facts and statistics and newspaper clippings. In the 2010s, British writer, director, and I would say visionary, Nicholas Kent, wrote and produced verbatim plays at the Tricycle Theatre in London about such things as the Arms to Iraq inquiry, the Nuremberg trials, the Macpherson inquiry into the death of Stephen Lawrence, and the detentions at Guantanamo Bay, that last drawn from letters written by British inmates. And then in 2011, London Road by Aleki Blythe and Adam Cork. That's perhaps the first verbatim musical, and it was produced at the National Theatre in London, proved very popular, by the way, and had an extended run. The play's about a series of murders, and it was drawn directly from interviews conducted with the people involved. Of course, and you can think of other verbatim plays now that we're talking about it. Verbatim theater creates a sense of immediacy, a you are there quality, and it steps aside and asks for its audience, tonight that's you, to judge the action of the play and the events depicted based on what was really said and done. That's where you come in. I hope that we'll have a lively discussion afterwards, partly to help Jayne move her play forward. So we're interested in what you think about the play itself, but perhaps also the events depicted. Jayne Moyes has written a verbatim play, she's a very talented writer, about the Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearing of Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Those hearings began September 4 to 7, 2018, but then, as you may recall, several days later, it was revealed that a woman named Christine Blasey Ford had written a letter to one of the members of that committee, Senator Dianne Feinstein, back in July, before September, accusing Kavanaugh of sexual assault while they were both in high school in 1982. The committee postponed its vote and invited both Kavanaugh and Blasey Ford to appear before the committee. In the interim, two other women, Deborah Ramirez and Julie Swetnick, accused Kavanaugh of separate past instances of sexual assault. Two New York Times reporters, Robin Pogrebin and Kate Kelly, reported on the hearing and together wrote a book called The Education of Brett Kavanaugh, an Investigation. Jayne drew on that book, as well as transcripts from the hearing to write her play. She became quite an expert on this. So with that as preamble, hear and see now the real events in the language of those who created them. I Like Beer by Jayne Moyes.
I Like Beer by Jayne Moyes. Cast: Judge Brett Kavanaugh, 54, nominee for Supreme Court Justice. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, 52, social scientist and professor. Russel Ford, 56, Christine's husband. Robin Pogrebin, New York Times journalist. Kate Kelly, New York Times journalist. Even senators 2, 4, and 6, representing a combination of Democratic senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Odd senators 1, 3, 5, 7, representing a combination of Republican senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Mark, 18, high school senior, the smart but insolent schoolboy in a Letterman jacket and necktie, to be played by Senator 1. PJ, 18, high school senior, football player, to be played by Senator 4. Squi, 18, high school senior, football player, to be played by Senator 3. Lehland, 15, high school sophomore and student athlete, Christine's BFF, to be played by Senator 2. Rachel Mitchell, female prosecutor, hired by the Republican senators to question the witnesses. Note: trigger warning, depiction, and discussion of sexual violence, explicit language. This play is based solely on the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing held on September 4, 2018, investigating allegations of sexual assault against the Supreme Court Judge nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Much of the dialogue is verbatim, pulled from the official transcript. Information and dialogue for this play was also provided from The Education of Brett Kavanaugh by Robin Pogrebin and Kate Kelly, who act as narrators in the show. All non-verbatim dialogue is based closely off their analysis of Kavanaugh's upbringing, informed from interviews with the judge's former schoolmates, friends, teachers, and colleagues. The set should be simple enough to allow easy flow of characters' personas, set locations, and time changes, but resemble the Senate chambers. The characters playing Brett, Christine, and the senators should each have a defining costume piece that distinguishes them as their 1982 counterparts that can be easily accessed on stage. You know, if we want to sit here and talk about whether a Supreme Court nomination should be based on a high school yearbook page, I think that's taken us to a new level of absurdity. Brett Kavanaugh. Scene 1, Storytellers. The Senate Judiciary Committee meeting room, a wooden room with a large half-oval desk along the back wall. There's an American flag on each side of the room by doors leading off stage. In front of the senator's desk, there's a small prosecutor's desk. Stage left, there is a desk with 2 chairs. Downstage right, there's a bathroom with a mirror, seeing into the room facing out to the audience. Below the mirror, there's a sink, and on the back wall, there's a toilet. Robin Pogrebin and Kate Kelly enter. They each take a seat, sitting next to each other at the desk, and read together from a prepared document addressing the audience.
On September 28, 2018, after a wrenching Senate hearing in which a California professor accused a Supreme Court nominee, Judge Brett M. Kavanaugh, of sexually assaulting her as a teenager, the Federal Bureau of Investigation opened an inquiry into the matter. 10 people were interviewed. Kavanaugh and his accuser, Christine Blasey Ford, were not among them. 6 days later, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee gathered in a secure facility to review the FBI's report on the allegations. It was inconclusive. The committee voted, and after Kavanaugh was confirmed, we put away our notebooks and moved on to other stories. But we continued to think about leads that had come to light during the confirmation process and the questions that remained unanswered.
During that same time period, dozens of people from Kavanaugh's past clamored to be heard. The FBI, Senate offices, and newsrooms had been overwhelmed with messages from friends, former classmates, and acquaintances of the judge, offering a range of perspectives on his life and work. The vast majority were never able to reach the FBI to have their input considered.
With so many loose ends dangling, much of the country had a sense of unfinished business. And so did we. Thanks to unexpected new tips, and our shared background with the judge, we had been pulled off our regular beats at the New York Times, Robin, Coltrin, Kate, Business, to join the team covering Kavanaugh's confirmation. Robin was in Kavanaugh's class at Yale, just a few doors away from him in the freshman dorm.
Like Kavanaugh, Kate grew up in the Washington, D.C. area and attended a girls' high school in the network of his high school, Georgetown Prep.
We set out to complete the investigation. Over a 10-month period, we read through thousands of pages of media accounts and public documents, studied high school and college writings from the 1980s, watched video of Kavanaugh's past speeches and testimony, and conducted hundreds of interviews.
And are we ready to share what we found?
Not quite. First, we realized that our audience will evaluate the results of our investigation through their own perspectives. In the course of our reporting, we saw how easy it was for observers to project onto the confirmation process whatever they wanted to believe. Even without a fuller sense of the facts, many had already made up their minds.
It is hard, maybe impossible, to set aside personal history or political orientation when considering the questions about Brett Kavanaugh. If Kavanaugh mistreated Ford but has conducted himself honorably in the past 36 years, does he deserve to be on the court? If there is no dispositive proof,
If there is not dispositive proof that Kavanaugh engaged in such misbehavior, were the accusations enough to eliminate him from consideration? Was his temperament during the last day of testimony in itself disqualifying?
did Brett Kavanaugh assault one or several women during his youth? Should he be on the Supreme Court, where he is poised to be a swing vote on matters of security, social justice, and personal freedom? How do we dispassionately examine these questions when the allegations are so emotionally resonant for so many people? And what did we learn about Justice Kavanaugh, our country, and ourselves from the polarizing confirmation process?
We leave those conclusions to our audience. No doubt they will be debated for many years to come.
We will be revisiting this hearing and filling in the gaps based on the information we have gathered to give you a fuller picture of this rushed process. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy the facts.
Stick to the story, please, Robin.
On June 27th, Justice Kennedy abruptly announced his retirement from the Supreme Court. Kennedy's departure means that Trump could replace him with a more reliable conservative, cementing a right-wing leaning majority on the court. The opportunity means that the White House, together with Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, would need to move quickly to get its nominee confirmed by the Republican-led Senate before the midterm elections, which has a chance to threaten to upend their majority.
Then came his surprise announcement. After Kennedy was privately assured by the White House that Trump would strive to preserve the justice's Supreme Court legacy, and that he was leaning toward replacing Kennedy with the justice's former clerk, Brett Kavanaugh.
When Kavanaugh's name first emerged on the short list to succeed Kennedy on the High Court, Christine Blasey Ford was on the beach in Santa Cruz, where her family had a small second home. As a professor with summers off, she typically spent much of June and July at the house, surfing and spending time with friends while her boys attended a state-run junior lifeguard camp. Her husband, Russel, often stayed behind in Palo Alto to be near his work, but he joined them for the weekends. Now Christine was suddenly reading the news on her smartphone that the man she had remembered as her assailant was in the running for a lifetime judicial position alongside other conservative judges.
Scene 2, Beach House. Lights up on the bathroom of Christine's house in California. There's a sink, toilet, and a mirror which sees out to the audience. Enter Christine, dressed in a red bathing suit and rash guard. She gets dressed, leaving the suit on underneath her clothes, yells out to her husband, who's off stage.
Honey, did you get the boards into the garage?
Yeah, got them.
Thanks.
When do you work today? I'm heading near the university around 2 if you want to ride together.
I have a department meeting around 3, so that's good.
She pulls out her phone and is caught off guard by a notification.
Great. Mind if we pick up the dry cleaning on the way? Do you have time for that?
No response.
Hun?
Once he was selected and it seemed like he was popular and it was a sure vote, I was calculating daily the risk benefit for me of coming forward and wondering whether I would just be jumping in front of a train that was headed to where it was headed anyway, and that I would just be personally annihilated. Ultimately, I thought it was my civic duty to relay the information I had about Mr. Kavanaugh's conduct so that those considering his nomination would know about this assault. I had a sense of urgency to relay the information to the Senate and the President as soon as possible before a nominee was selected. I did not know how specifically to do this. I called my congressional representative and let her receptionist know that someone was on the president's shortlist, that they had attacked me. I also sent a message to the encrypted Washington Post confidential tip line. I did not use my name, but I provided the names of Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. I stated that Mr. Kavanaugh had assaulted me in the 1980s in Maryland. This was an extremely hard thing for me to do, but I felt that I couldn't not do it.
Christine, everything all right?
Exit Christine. Scene 3, Committee Meeting. The Senate Committee Meeting Room. Enter Kate and Robin.
Ford felt compelled to share her experience with officials in Washington. She wanted her memory of being assaulted by Kavanaugh to be considered in the decision-making process, even if the president and lawmakers ultimately concluded that her experience was too dated or irrelevant. Given that President Trump reportedly wanted to reach a decision quickly, it seemed to Ford that time was short. Keeping the information to herself did not feel like an option.
Meanwhile, the White House was gearing up to announce Kavanaugh as Trump's Supreme Court pick. Judges, litigators, and policy wonks around the country were abuzz, given Trump's effort to build a suspense around 4 finalists and a down-to-the-wire decision. This reality show approach prompted some on Twitter to echo The Bachelor, in suggesting that the president would ask his nominee, "Will you accept this robe?"
In preparing for the hearings, Kavanaugh drew on his carefully cultivated social graces as he made the customary rounds of senators' offices, brandishing his hail fellow well-met demeanor and a pocket copy of the Constitution. He also rehearsed the way presidential candidates practice for debates. His coaching team included heavyweights like Don McGahn, White House counsel Bill Burke, Kavanaugh's friend. Even Senators Orrin Hatch and Lindsey Graham lent a hand. Both Republicans were senior members of the Judiciary Committee and proud supporters of Kavanaugh.
In a way, Kavanaugh's entire life had been a preparation for this moment. The careful avoidance of controversy as he made his way through the finest educational institutions, the cultivation of important mentors, and the connection to people in power.
When the first day of Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation hearings arrived on Tuesday, September 4th, 2018, the Ford allegations had yet to surface. Instead, the Democratic members of the Senate Judiciary Committee were focused on Kavanaugh's documents, specifically the thousands of pages from the judge's years in the Bush White House that they had said had been deprived of seeing.
So, Judge, I see you got here without my walking you in.
Good morning.
Good to see you. I've enjoyed conversation with your wife and 2 daughters. My wife was here yesterday, and she loved talking with your wife. So, with what I think we should begin.
Well, the committee received just last night, less than 15 hours ago, 42,000 pages of documents that we have not had an opportunity to review or read.
You're out of order. I'll proceed.
We cannot possibly move forward, Mr. Chairman, with this hearing.
I extend a very warm welcome to Judge Kavanaugh, to his wife Ashley, and their 2 daughters.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with my colleague. I believe this hearing should be postponed. Mr. Chairman, if we cannot be recognized, I move to adjourn.
Exit Senators and Brett.
The Senate Democrats said that 415,000 pages of documents they had received, plus an additional 42,000 just before the hearing started, amounted to a mere 7% of the writings and emails Kavanaugh had composed, read, or participated in over the course of his career.
They also argued that the Republicans had done an end run around the usual process, allowing Kavanaugh's friends and attorney Bill Brooke to determine which documents were released, rather than the National Archives as usual.
The confidentiality of it was not particularly unusual. What was unusual was all the ways in which there had been intrusions into the standard operating procedure in order to avoid getting things into the record.
When the FBI's 6th investigation of Kavanaugh was completed, McConnell announced that its results would not be made publicly available. The White House would loan the FBI report to Congress for just starting the day before the hearing, and senators would have to view it in special soundproof reading room in the Senate building known as the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, or SCIF.
To enter the SCIF, senators had to go past the guard to get through a heavy metal double doors requiring punched access codes. The viewing began at 8 a.m., with Grassley getting the first look, followed by Feinstein at 9 a.m. Then at 10, Senate Judiciary Republicans were invited in, followed by the committee's Democrats at 11, and so on in alternating intervals. The legislators were not allowed to take notes on paper or to bring any personal electronic devices. They were not provided copies. They could not bring in staffers. They could not relay any of the findings.
Reactions to the report split, perhaps predictably, along partisan lines. Republicans said they were satisfied that the FBI investigation had produced nothing new. Democrats said it raised more questions than answers. The only mention of sexual harassment came on day 2 of the hearings when the Democratic senator of Hawaii asked Kavanaugh the same question she'd made standard issue for all the nominees during her tenure.
Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
He answered no. Kavanaugh had expected his confirmation to be contentious. He had lived through similar questioning when he was being evaluated for the DC Circuit. What he did not expect was the story about his past that reared its head later in the week. In light of the battle for his reputation, the arguments over access to his documents would seem tame.
Then, only at the 11th hour on the eve of Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation vote, did the ranking member refer the allegations to the FBI. And then, sadly, the allegations were leaked to the press. Once the letter was sent and released in the press, a mad dash at Senate broke out by Democrats to reopen the FBI investigation and give Dr. Ford a proper chance to be heard.
This twist led to what we call the Bathroom Summit, a very informal and fairly hush-hush meeting in a bathroom behind the committee meeting room held the night of September 12th.
Exit Robin and Kate. Scene 4, bathroom swimsuit. The focus shift to a small bathroom behind the committee meeting room. In a rush, Senator 2, Senator 4, and Senator 6 frantically. Senator 4 locks the door behind them as they enter and huddle into a secret sharing circle.
Come in here, Senator. I just handed over the letter, so we need to get started on this FBI investigation. I will contact Dr. Ford and ask her to testify. We can reopen the hearings.
Senator, she stated in the letter that she wanted to remain anonymous. What makes you think she would testify?
We can't very well hear her story without her here. She sent us this information so that we can evaluate who Judge Kavanaugh really is. We need her up there in order to make them understand. I know she may be resistant, but this falls apart without her. There's already too little evidence because it was so long ago. Get her on the first flight out here.
There is a knocking on the door.
Occupied. It's probably Senator Grassley. I asked him to meet me here. Let him in.
Senator 1, Senator 3, and Senator 5 enter the already cramped bathroom, a bit annoyed at the whole situation as they shuffle into the circle.
All right, I think this will be fine. Chuck, can I have a minute?
Senator Feinstein, what in the hell are we doing in here?
Well, Senator, I brought you here along with my counsel and yours because I have recently come into a very interesting obstacle to the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh that needed to be discussed in private. I have in my hand a letter from one of my constituents who claims in detail how Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her in their youth.
And when did you receive this?
Today.
You are not actually suggesting slandering a good man's name just to promote your own agenda. What is this hoax?
It's not a hoax. She claims that this happened in high school. She has records from a therapy session admitting the assault, naming Kavanaugh directly, dating back to 2012. We are going public with this, and I am going to reassemble the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's done.
You really think this charade will stop anything? Justice Kennedy insisted that Kavanaugh take this seat, and Trump agreed. Look around at who you're sitting next to.
Thank you for sharing this with me. You've got to do what you've got to do.
Odd senators exit. Even senators wait for a beat, then reopen the door and exit, awkwardly bumping into Robin and Kate as they enter the bathroom. Robin and Kate wait for the horde to leave before nodding each other.
Ford did not want to make her story public. The Senate Judiciary Committee pushed forward anyways, deciding on that same day that Feinstein's statement was released to vote on the nomination on September 27th. The Supreme Court's new term was set to begin October 1st, and the committee Republicans hoped to seat Kavanaugh by then. Republicans scheduled a hearing without talking to her or even inviting her to testify. She was told she had to show up or the committee would move forward with the vote. It took a public outcry for the majority to back down and give her even a few days to come before the committee. Republicans also scheduled this hearing with Dr. Ford without having her allegations investigated by the FBI.
Republicans also refused to call anyone who could speak to the evidence that would support or refute Dr. Ford's claim, and not one witness who could address credibility and character of either Ford or Kavanaugh has been called. This includes the other 3 women who have put forth allegations against the judge, Deborah Ramirez and Julie Swetnick, who were willing and asked to testify.
On September 17th, Deborah Ramirez returned a message she had gotten from the Washington Post reporter Ronan Farrow. He told her he was looking into allegations of sexual misconduct against Kavanaugh at Yale.
She said she didn't have any stories about Brett Kavanaugh and sexual misconduct. Farrow told her he was trying to verify a story about a night when someone exposed himself to her. Ramirez ultimately chose to share her experience, but it did not warrant a reopening of the FBI's investigation. There are 7 confirmed witnesses of this assault. Mark Judge, a friend of Kavanaugh's who was named as being present and participating in the assault, wasn't called either. Judge's college girlfriend even offered to testify, claiming to have knowledge of the assault of Deborah Ramirez and character of Brett and Mark at this time. She wasn't interviewed.
But the Republican committee members refused to reopen the FBI investigation or allow anyone but Judge Kavanaugh or Dr. Ford to testify.
The rushed investigation, which officially speaking was merely an extension of the background check that had already been performed on Kavanaugh, was controversial even before it began. The parameters were the first point of contention, dictated by the White House, which had the right to direct the due diligence investigations of its own Supreme Court nominee. The initial orders were to limit the scope to parties who had been privy to the events alleged by Ford and Ramirez.
Right away, there was confusion, not just about the scope of the investigation, but also about who was running it. President Trump said that the FBI agents would have free rein over the potential interviewees in the investigation. The White House was calling the shots. The Republican leaders had helped draft the witness list. Ford and Kavanaugh themselves were never even interviewed by the FBI. Dr. Ford requested to be interviewed by the FBI, but that request was denied, reportedly with the approval of the White House and Senate Republicans.
Between the snapping cameras, the cramped and crowded room, the high dudgeon, and the whiplash of moving from one senator's stern 5-minute question session to another's obsequious tone, the September 27th hearing was a surreal experience for the many glued to the proceedings. In an age of reality television, the hearing held its own.
Scene 5, opening remarks. Enter Senators and Christine.
This morning, we continue our hearing on the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to serve as Associate Justice on our Supreme Court. We will hear from 2 witnesses, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and Judge Kavanaugh. Thanks, of course, to Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh for accepting our committee's invitation to testify, and also thank them for their volunteering to testify before we even invited. Both Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh have been through a terrible couple weeks. They and their families have received vile threats. What they have endured ought to be considered by all of us as unacceptable and a poor reflection on the state of civility in our democracy. Nowhere in any of these 6 FBI reports, which committee investigators have reviewed on a bipartisan basis, was there a whiff of any issue at all, related in any way to inappropriate sexual behavior. Dr. Ford first raised her allegations in a secret letter to the ranking member nearly 2 months ago in July. The ranking member took no action. The letter wasn't shared with me or my colleagues or my staff. These allegations could have been investigated in a way that maintained the confidentiality that Dr. Ford requested.
And that's where Dr. Ford was mistreated. This is a shameful way to treat our witness who insisted on confidentiality.
And of course, Judge Kavanaugh, who has had to address these allegations in the midst of a media circus. When I received Dr. Ford's letter, my staff and I recognized the seriousness of these allegations and immediately began our committee's investigation, consistent with the way the committee has handled such allegations in the past. Every step of the way, the Democratic side refused to participate in what should have been a bipartisan investigation. Contrary to what the public has been led to believe, the FBI doesn't perform any credibility assessments or verify the truth of any events in these background investigations. The FBI provided us with the allegations. Now, it's up to the Senate to assess their credibility, which brings us to this very time. I look forward to a fair and respectful hearing. That's what we promised Dr. Ford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll just make a brief comment on your references to me. Yes, I did receive a letter from Dr. Ford. We spoke on the phone. She reiterated that she wanted this held confidential, and I held it confidential up to a point where the witness was willing to come forward. And I think, as I make my remarks, perhaps you'll see why. Because how women are treated in the United States with this kind of concern is really wanting a lot of reform. Good morning, Dr. Ford. Thank you for coming forward and being willing to share your story with us. I know this wasn't easy for you, but before you get to the testimony, and the chairman chose not to do this, I think it's important to make sure you're properly introduced. And I have to—
By the way, I was going to introduce her, but if you want to introduce her, I'll be glad to have you do that. But I want you to know I didn't forget to do it, because I would do that just as she was about to speak.
Thank you. I have to say, when I saw your CV, Dr. Ford, I was extremely impressed.
Enter Kate.
She has a bachelor's degree from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, 2 master's degrees, and 1 from Stanford and 1 from Pepperdine, and a PhD from the University of Southern California. She's a professor affiliated with both Stanford University and Palo Alto University. She published over 65 peer-reviewed articles and have received numerous awards for your work and research.
And as if that was not enough, you are a wife, a mother of 2 sons, and a constituent from California. So I am very grateful to you for your strength and your bravery in coming forward. I know it's hard. But before I turn it over, I want to say something about what is to be discussed today and where we are as a country. We are here to decide whether to evaluate this nominee to the most prestigious court in our country. It's about the integrity of the institution and the integrity of this institution. The entire country is watching how we handle these allegations. I hope the majority changes their tactics, opens their minds, and seriously reflects on why we are here. We are here for one reason: to determine whether Judge Kavanaugh should be elevated to one of the most powerful positions in our country. This is not a trial of Dr. Ford, it's a job interview for Judge Kavanaugh. Is Brett Kavanaugh who we want on the most prestigious court in our country? Is he the best we can do? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Scene 6, Country Club. Country Club, lights up on a diving board and pool lounge chair. Robin and Kate stand on either side of Christine, 15, who is leaning at the edge of the diving board. She disrobes from her suit, so she's wearing only a red swimsuit, as she hesitates, breathing deeply. Enter Kate and Robin.
The Blaseys lived in a comfortable 2-story home in the southern portion of Potomac, Maryland, not far from the Potomac River. Both her parents, Ralph and Paula, played golf at the Columbia Country Club, a historic recreational and social club on Connecticut Avenue in Chevy Chase. Established in 1898, the Columbia Club was known for its grooming of skilled amateur golfers, and its membership included prominent business executives, journalists, and politicians.
In the summer of 1982, Christine spent most days at the country club, swimming and practicing diving. The club was a mecca for teenagers, where they could mix with kids from various schools in the area, hang by the pool, and order fries, all on the family account. It was considered a safe space, so familial that members and their friends could walk in and out easily. She was outgoing and popular, running with a cliquish crowd of about 15 girls. Her closest friend was Lehland Ingham, a sports prodigy with a Princess Diana-style bob and a 1,000-watt grin.
In that same summer, when she was just 15, Ford remembered a time when Kavanaugh had pressed her to a bed at a beer-fueled house party, covered her mouth to prevent her from screaming, making it difficult for her to breathe, ground his body over hers, and tried to remove her clothes. Ford hadn't told anyone about the incident at the time, not her parents, nor her 2 brothers, nor any of her close friends. Instead, she had buried the experience, unsure how to process it or articulate it to others. Now, 36 years later, she finally felt compelled to report what had happened.
Exit Robin and Kate. As Christine speaks her testimony, all senators enter and begin to circle her like sharks.
I am here today not because I want to be. I'm terrified. I'm here because I believe it is my civic duty to tell you what happened to me while Brett Kavanaugh and I were in high school. I have described the events publicly before. I summarized them in my letter to Ranking Member Feinstein and gave again in a letter to Chairman Grassley. I understand and appreciate the importance of your hearing from me directly about what happened to me and the impact that it has had on my life and on my family. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I attended the Holton Arms School in Bethesda, Maryland from 1978 to 1984. During my time at this school, girls at Holton Arms frequently met and became friendly with the boys from all boys schools in the area, including the Landon School, Gonzaga High School, Georgetown Prep, as well as our country clubs and other places where kids and families socialized. This is how I met Brett Kavanaugh, the boy who sexually assaulted me.
Exit senators. Christine exposes her swimsuit. Enter Lehland, 15.
Hey, Chrissy, you okay? There's a shark down there? You look really freaked out.
Oh, no, it's nothing. I guess I'm just nervous for tryouts on Monday.
Don't worry too much. You've been swimming all day. Even an Olympian's gotta take a break sometimes.
Yeah, you'd know. You basically are one. I wasn't blessed with the natural beauty and athleticism, so I actually have to practice to get better.
Oh, shut up. That's it. You've gone crazy. I demand you take a break. Summer is almost over. You've been moping around for weeks since you and Chris split, and we aren't going to have too many more days to find you a replacement boyfriend. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to find him at the bottom of a pool.
Maybe I'll do one more dive just to make sure.
No way. Dry off. I didn't want to have to do this, but I have no choice. You need to have some fun. We're going to the prep party tonight. It's final.
What? No. What if Chris is there?
Then he can just get jealous of all the hunks on your arm. Mark told me it's just going to be him and some of the football buddies. They're really fun. And I heard a few girls from the varsity team were going to come after cheer practice.
Being at a party with them will give us a leg up at tryouts. But how would we even get there?
Don't worry. I'll get Mark to give us a ride. He'll do anything but just bat my eyes at him.
Yeah, he's doing it for your eyes.
Exit Christine and Lehland. Scene 7. Opening statement. The senators resume as Brett storms into the room.
Now we will continue with the opening remarks of Judge Kavanaugh. Will you please rise, sir?
Yes.
Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Yeah. And like we offered to Dr. Ford, you can take whatever time you want now for your opening statement, and then we'll go to questions. So proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Feinstein, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to make my statement. I wrote it myself yesterday afternoon and evening. No one has seen a draft of it except for one of my former law clerks. This is my statement. Less than 2 weeks ago, Dr. Ford publicly accused me of committing wrongdoing at an event more than 36 years ago when we were both in high school. I denied the allegation immediately, categorically, and unequivocally. All 4 people allegedly at the event, including Dr. Ford's longtime friend, Ms. Lehland Kaiser, have said they recall no such event. Her longtime friend, Ms. Kaiser, said under penalty of felony that she does not know me and does not believe she ever saw me at a party ever. Senator, I'll do whatever the committee wants. I wanted a hearing the day after the allegation came up. I wanted to be here that day. Instead, 10 days pass where all this nonsense is coming out. You know, that I'm in gangs, I'm on boats in Rhode Island, I'm in Colorado, you know, I'm cited all over the place. And these things are printed and run breathlessly by cable news. You know, I wanted a hearing the next day. My family's been destroyed by this, Senator, destroyed. I know that any kind of investigation, Senate, FBI, Montgomery County Police, whatever, will clear me. I was not at the party described by Dr. Ford. This confirmation process has become a national disgrace. The Constitution gives the Senate an important role in the confirmation process, but you have replaced advice and consent with search and destroy. Since my nomination in July, there's been a frenzy on the left to come up with something, anything, to block my confirmation. Shortly after I was nominated, the Democratic Senate leader said he would oppose me with everything he's got. A Democratic senator on this committee publicly referred to me as evil. Evil. Think about that word. It said that those that supported me were complicit in evil. Another Democratic senator on this committee said, Judge Kavanaugh is your worst nightmare. A former head of the Democratic National Committee said, Judge Kavanaugh will threaten the lives of millions of Americans for decades to come. I understand the passions of the moment, but I would say to those senators, your words have meaning. Millions of Americans listen carefully to you. This is a circus. As we all know in the United States political system of the early 2000s, what goes around comes around. I'm not questioning that Dr. Ford may have been sexually assaulted by some person in some place at some time. But I have never done this to her or to anyone. That's not who I am. It is not who I was. I am innocent of this charge. We live in a country devoted to due process and the rule of law. That means taking allegations seriously. But if the mere allegation, the mere assertion of an allegation, a refuted allegation from 36 years ago is enough to destroy a person's life and career, we will have abandoned the basic principles of fairness and due process that define our legal system and our country. I ask you to judge me by the standard that you would want applied to your father, your husband, your brother, or your son. I intend no ill will to Dr. Ford and her family. The other night, Ashley and my daughter Liza said their prayers. Little Liza, all of 10 years old, said to Ashley, we should pray for the woman. That's a lot of wisdom from a 10-year-old. We mean no ill will. Explaining this to our daughters has been about the worst experience of our lives. Ashley has been a rock. Thank God every day for Ashley and my family. Listen to the people I know. Listen to the people that have known me my whole life. Listen to the people that I've grown up with and worked with and played with and coached with and dated and taught and gone to games with and had beers with. And listen to the witnesses who allegedly were at this event 36 years ago. Listen to Miss Kaiser. She does not know me.
Thank you for those statements, Judge. We will now proceed with questioning. You have given prepared remarks, then you will submit to question and answer sessions, each of which would take about 5 minutes. The questioners will alternate between Republicans and Democrats. The Republicans have selected as their interlocutor Rachel Mitchell, a sex crimes prosecutor from Arizona who flew in for the hearing.
Enter Robin and Kate, summoned by the need to explain who Rachel Mitchell is.
Oh, Rachel Mitchell.
Format was atypical. Senators usually ask their own questions, but the Republicans had deemed it important to have a seemingly impartial female interlocutor rather than to give the appearance of a bunch of white, powerful men bearing down on Ford.
Meticulous and plain-spoken lawyer with a short, blunt haircut and rimless glasses, Mitchell seemed ideally suited for the job. A benign, by-the-hook presence devoid of prosecutorial zeal, she had not been easy to find. Republican committee staffers spent long hours contacting dozens of female lawyers about doing the questioning at the hearing. Quite a few turned them down, presumably wanting to avoid the highly charged politicized process.
Mitchell had overseen the Special Victims Unit at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office in Arizona, spent dozens of years in the sex crime subdivision, and handled some major local cases. She was there to stand in for the male senators, to ask their tough questions, softened with a veneer of compassion and expertise.
But the fact that Mitchell was representing a panel consisting entirely of white male Republicans on the committee, some of them well into their 80s, remained unavoidable. A number of the people who attended the hearing would later say that Mitchell's presence, that of a lone woman sitting at a small desk far below the dais, asking questions on behalf of the senior male senators above her until she was cut off, was one of the most disconcerting elements of an already unsettling day.
Enter Rachel Mitchell.
Good afternoon, Judge Kavanaugh. We have not met. My name is Rachel Mitchell. I'd like to go over a couple of guidelines for our question and answer session today. If I ask a question...
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. If I ask a question...
Thank you.
If I ask a question that you do not understand, please ask me to clarify it or ask it in a different way. I may ask a question where I incorporate some information you've already provided. If I get it wrong, please correct me. I'm not going to ask you to guess. If you do estimate, please let me know you're estimating. Now, I want to make sure that all of the committee members have gotten a copy of the definition of sexual behavior.
Yes, I have at least one.
And you have that as well, Judge Kavanaugh?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, have you been given or reviewed a copy of the questions that I will be asking you?
No.
Has anyone told you the questions that I will be asking you?
No.
I want you to take a moment to review the definition that's before you of sexual behavior.
Kavanaugh looks irritated. He furrows his brow, purses his lips, sniffs as he reads.
Have you had a chance to review it?
I have. I may refer back to it if I can.
Yes, please. I'd like to point out two specific parts. Among the examples of sexual behavior, it includes rubbing or grinding your genitals against somebody, clothed or unclothed. And I would also point out that the definition applies whether or not the acts were sexually motivated or, for example, horseplay. Do you understand the definition I have given you?
I do.
And again, if at any time you need to review that answer, please let me know. Judge Kavanaugh, it's my understanding that you have denied the allegations by Dr. Ford and Ms. Ramirez. Is that correct?
Yes.
These women have asked the FBI to investigate their claims. I listened carefully to what you said. Your concern is evident and clear. And if you're very confident of your position, and you appear to be, why aren't you also asking the FBI to investigate these claims?
And whoever wants, whatever the committee decides, I'm all in.
But the question is...
I'm all in immediately.
Judge, the terrible and hard part of this is when we get an allegation, we're not in a position to prove it or disprove it. Therefore, we have to depend on some outside authority for it. And it would just seem to me that when these allegations came forward, that you would want the FBI to investigate those claims and clear it up once and for all.
Judge Kavanaugh, earlier today, Dr. Christine Ford sat in that same chair, and under oath, she said clearly and unequivocally that she was a victim of sexual assault at your hands. She didn't flinch at the prospect of submitting herself to an FBI investigation of these charges. We know, and I'm sure she's been advised by her attorneys, that a person lying to the FBI can face criminal prosecution. You have clearly and unequivocally denied that you assaulted Dr. Ford. With that statement, you must believe that there is no credible evidence or any credible witness that could prove otherwise. I can't try to imagine what you have been through and your family's been through, and I'm sure I wouldn't get close to it.
Okay, I'm sure you wouldn't.
I'm sure I wouldn't. You gave an impassioned statement, and in the course of it you said, "I welcome any kind of investigation." I quote you, "I welcome any kind of investigation." I've got a suggestion for you. Right now, turn to your left in the front row to Don McGann, counsel to President Donald Trump. Ask him to suspend this hearing and nomination process until the FBI completes its investigation of the charges made by Dr. Ford and others, and goes to bring the witnesses forward and provides that information to this hearing. I am sure that the chairman at that point will understand that there is a reasonable request to finally put to rest these charges if they are false, or to prove them if they are not. You spent 2 years in the White House office that approved judicial nominees. You turned to the FBI over and over and over again for their work. Let's bring them in here and now. Turn to Don McGahn and tell him it's time to get this done. An FBI investigation is the only way to answer some of these questions.
Senator.
Stop the clock. The committee is running this hearing, not the White House, not Don McGahn, not even you as a nominee. We are here today because Dr. Ford asked for an opportunity to be heard. I know you did too, as well. In fact, maybe even before she did. We're here because people wanted to be heard from charges that they all thought were unfair. Or activities like sexual assault was unfair. So I want to assure you, Senator, regardless of what you say to Don McGahn, we're not suspending this hearing. Proceed to answer the question or so, whatever, or to, if the gentleman.
I'll just say this, if you, Judge Kavanaugh, turn to Don McGahn and to this committee and say, for the sake of my reputation, my family name, and to get to the bottom of the truth of this, I am not going to be an obstacle in an FBI investigation. I would hope that all the members of the committee would join me in saying, we're going to abide by your wishes, and we will have that investigation.
I welcome whatever the committee wants to do, because I'm telling the truth.
I want to know what you want to do.
I'm telling the truth.
I want to know what you want to do, Judge.
I'm innocent. I'm innocent of this charge.
Then you're prepared for an FBI investigator.
They don't reach conclusions. You reach the conclusion, Senator.
Lights out. Scene 8. Questioning. Senate Committee Meeting Room.
Apart from the assault itself, these past couple weeks have been the hardest of my life. I've had to relive this trauma in front of the world, and I've seen my life picked apart by people on television, on Twitter, other social media, other media in this body, who have never met me or spoken with me. I've been accused of acting out of partisan political motives. Those who say that do not know me. I'm an independent person and I am no one's pawn. My motivation in coming forward was to be helpful and to provide facts about how Mr. Kavanaugh's actions have damaged my life, so that you could take into a serious consideration as you make your decision about how to proceed. It's not my responsibility to determine whether Mr. Kavanaugh deserves to sit on the Supreme Court. My responsibility is to tell you the truth. I understand that a professional prosecutor has been hired to ask me questions, and I am committed to doing my very best to answer them. I've never been questioned by a prosecutor, and I will do my best. At the same time, because the committee members will be judging my credibility, I do hope to be able to engage directly with each of you. And at this point, I will do my best to answer your questions and would request some caffeine.
Coffee or a Diet Coke or something?
That sounds good. That would be great. Thanks.
Senator Seven motions off Robin, who runs off stage to fetch their drinks.
Thank you very much. Before I use my 5 minutes of questioning, I thought that I'm going to make sure that both Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh, I know that they're going to get a chance to answer the questions fully, so I hope that will be done in a...
Robin loudly brings in a coffee for Christine, interrupting the senator's speech. She brings a coffee to Christine first. They exchange a look. She then goes to the senator. She leans in and whispers in his ear.
And Dr. Ford, I'm told that you want a break right now, and if you do, that's fine.
I'm okay. I got the coffee. Thank you very much. I think I can proceed and sip on the coffee.
He calls to Robin as she's taking her seat.
Can nobody mix up my coffee right? So you're pretty fortunate. We can continue. So now with that, female prosecutor, you have my 5 minutes to ask questions.
Rachel shuffles her papers, preparing to question Dr. Ford, but is dismissed by a look and gesture from Robin. Robin and Kate approach Christine. The senators can't seem to tell the difference.
Can you tell us if this has affected your life in any way?
The primary impact was in the initial 4 years after the event. I struggled academically. I struggled very much in Chapel Hill and in college. When I was 17 and went off to college, I had a very hard time, more so than others, forming new friendships, and especially friendships with boys. And I had academic problems.
When you spoke, it became very clear how deeply you felt about this and the need that you wanted to remain confidential. Can you talk a little bit about that? How did you decide to come forward?
Ultimately, because reporters were sitting outside my home and trying to talk to my dog through the window to calm the dog down, and a reporter appeared in my graduate classroom, and I mistook her for a student, and she came up to ask me a question, and I thought she was a student, and it turned out she was a reporter. So at that point, I felt like enough was enough. People were calling my colleagues at Stanford and leaving messages on their voicemails and on their email saying that they knew my name. Clearly, people knew my address because they were out in front of my house. And the mounting pressure, it seemed like it was time to just say what I needed to say.
Ford had been targeted for vicious harassment and even death threats, and her family had been forced to relocate. Ford had been impersonated online, and her email had been hacked. Her attorneys took issue with the committee's hastily scheduled public hearing, and the idea that she should testify at the same table as Judge Kavanaugh to relive the traumatic and harrowing incident. She was told the hearing would include interrogation by senators who appear to have made up their minds that she is mistaken and mixed up. No sexual assault survivor should be subjected to such an ordeal. Because of this, Christine's questioning surrounded around one root subject. Was it truly Brett Kavanaugh who assaulted her? Was she telling the truth?
Enough. That's 5 minutes. We must move on.
All right. Well, I'm sorry, but I want to ask you one question about the attack itself. You were clear about the attack and also just the level. You were clear about the attack being pushed into the room. You say you don't know quite by whom, but that it was Brett Kavanaugh that covered your mouth to prevent you from screaming, and then you escaped. How are you so sure that it was he?
The same way that I'm sure I'm talking to you right now. It's just basic memory functions. And also the level of norepinephrine and epinephrine in the brain that sort of, as you know, encodes, that neurotransmitter encodes memories into the hippocampus. And so the trauma-related experience then is kind of locked there, whereas other details kind of drift.
So what you're telling us is this could not be a case of mistaken identity?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. That is all.
Hello, Dr. Ford. I yield my time to the female prosecutor.
Hello, Dr. Ford. Some senators have suggested you were simply mixed up about who assaulted you. An ally of Judge Kavanaugh in the White House even promoted a wild theory about a Kavanaugh lookalike. You immediately rejected that theory, as did the innocent man who had been called that lookalike. In fact, he sent a letter to this committee forcefully rejecting this absurd theory. I ask consent to enter that in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Now, how did you know Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge? And is it possible that you had mixed them up with somebody else?
No, it is not. And the person that was blamed for the incident is actually the person who introduced me to them originally. So he was a member of the country club, the Columbia Country Club. And I don't want to talk about him because I think it's unfair, but he is the person that introduced me to them.
But you would not mix up somebody else with Brett Kavanaugh. Is that correct?
Correct.
Or Mark Judge?
Correct.
All right, that's 5. Let's move on. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, is it your intent to cede all Republican senators' time to your prosecutor rather than they themselves ceding their time to her?
Yes.
We all know that the prosecutor, even though this clearly is not a criminal proceeding, is asking Dr. Ford all kinds of questions about what happened before and after, but basically not during the attack. The prosecutor should know that sexual assault survivors often do not remember peripheral information such as what happened before or after the traumatic event, and yet she will persist in asking these questions, all to undermine the memory and basically the credibility of Dr. Ford. But we all know Dr. Ford's memory of the assault is very clear. This is a confirmation proceeding, so I'll just ask you very plainly, Dr. Ford, is there a political motivation for your coming forward with your account of the assault by Brett Kavanaugh?
No, and I'd like to reiterate that again, I was trying to get the information to you while there was still a list of other, what looked like equally qualified candidates.
And yet, they're not here to testify. Dr. Ford, I'd like to join my colleagues who have thanked you for coming forward today. And we all admire you for what you're doing, and I understand why you have come forward. You wanted us and the American people to know what you knew about the character of a man we are considering for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Ford. I'd like to give my time to the female prosecutor.
Really?
Proceed.
Okay. Can you describe all of the other social interactions that you had with Mr. Kavanaugh?
Briefly, yes, I can. There were, during freshman and sophomore year, particularly my sophomore year, which would have been his junior year of high school, 4 to 5 parties that my friends and I attended that were also attended by him.
Did anything happen at these events like we're talking about, besides the time we're talking about?
That's time. You can answer the question, then I'll go to Senator Harris. But go ahead and answer that question.
There was no sexual assault at any of those events. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes, those were just parties.
Or anything inappropriate is what I meant.
Well, maybe we can go into more detail when there's more time. I feel time pressure on that question, yes.
Okay.
Happy to answer in further detail if you want me to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish answering your question.
Okay. Did you want me to describe those parties, or?
Answer the question.
I'm just happy to describe them if you wanted me to, and I'm happy to not. It's just whatever you want. Whatever is your preference.
Maybe this will cut to the chase. My question is, was there anything else that was sexually inappropriate? Any inappropriate sexual behavior on the part of Mr. Kavanaugh towards you at any of these other functions?
No.
Okay.
All right, now we can move on. Senator Harris?
Senators exit periodically during the following line, leaving just Senator Six and Christine.
Hello, Dr. Ford. In Judge Kavanaugh's opening testimony, this is what he says. I never had any sexual or physical encounter of any kind with Dr. Ford. I'm not questioning that Dr. Ford may have been sexually assaulted by some person in some place at some time. Last night, the Republican staff of this committee released to the media a timeline that shows that they've interviewed 2 people who claim they were the ones who actually assaulted you. I'm asking you to address this new defense of mistaken identity directly. Dr. Ford, with what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%.
100%.
100%.
Thumbs up. Intermission. We will now have a 5-minute intermission, coming back at 6:19. We ready to begin?
We are.
Perfect. Scene 9, The Boys. Lights up. Enter Robin and Kate.
Georgetown Prep's priorities values Catholic traditions. Athleticism was strongly encouraged, academics were rigorous. There was an emphasis on becoming men. The upper grade teachers were all male. There was a sense among the students in the school's first 2 decades that they needed to become tough, traditional men. Over the years, the school adopted a contemporary sounding motto: work hard, play hard, pray hard, but most of all, be a good guy.
He lived in the athlete bubble and made fun of kids outside it. He was not known as a starter of trouble, but a joiner, signing on to the 100 Keg Club, riding in the party van, singing obnoxious songs about who was a good lay. Among Prep's alpha males, there was a sense of entitlement over girls, younger students, smaller boys, public school graduates, and non-athletes. A military-style social hierarchy was immediately evident to freshmen. First years were treated like plebes, to be picked on and pushed around by the upperclassmen, some of whom had suffered the same hazing rituals. The more diminutive students were sometimes deposited into campus trash cans or stuffed into lockers.
Kavanaugh was by that time a powerful figure in the student body. As a senior, he would captain the basketball team after scoring an average of 8 points per game. He played defensive back for the football team, wearing the number 23 on his jersey. He was named at the National Honor Society and recognized with a National Merit Scholarship after scoring highly on the PSAT, a precursor to the SAT college entrance exam. His senior fall, he applied to Yale, Brown, Princeton, and the University of Pennsylvania.
What happens at Georgetown Prep stays at Georgetown Prep. Heavy drinking, of course, was not unusual at this time and place. Rich teenagers in suburbs around the country were guzzling beer and pushing boundaries. Kavanaugh wasn't known for hosting parties. He was known for attending them, getting drunk, and throwing up.
Even with these questionable or admittedly false accounts of sexual assault, however, there exists a through line with the more substantiated ones: heavy drinking. Kavanaugh's alcohol use as a young man seems to have led to both bad behavior and very possibly bad memory. Scores of friends and former classmates have attested to Kavanaugh's penchant for beer and for excessive drinking during his high school and college years. In his book, Wasted, Mark Judge chronicled his beach week adventures in the summer of 1981, right after sophomore year at Prep.
Enter Mark.
We lit each other's underwear on fire, had beer fights, and barfed in the sink. A couple of guys took pictures of their penises. And when it became evident that one of the guys had a member that slanted, we called him Slope. There were girls in and out constantly. Most of the time, everyone, including the girls, was drunk. If you could breathe and walk at the same time, you could hook up with someone. This did not mean going all the way for the most part. But after a year spent in school without girls, heavy petting was virtually an orgy.
Exit Mark. Enter Brett, Senators, and Rachel.
Judge Kavanaugh, did you drink excessively in high school?
I drank beer with my friends. Almost everyone did. Sometimes I had too many beers. Sometimes others did. I like beer. I still like beer. But I did not drink beer to the point of blacking out, and I never sexually assaulted anyone. Yes, we drank beer. My friends and I, the boys and girls. Yes, we drank beer. I liked beer. Still like beer. We drank beer. I spent much of my time working out, lifting weights, playing basketball, or hanging out and having some beers with friends as we talked about life and football and school and girls. Drinking age, as I noted, was 18. So the seniors were legal, senior year in high school. People were legal to drink. And we drank beer. And I said sometimes probably had too many beers. And sometimes other people had too many beers. There's a fine line between drinking beer, which I gladly do, and which I fully embrace, and sexually assaulting someone, which is a violent crime. If every American who drinks beer or every American who drank beer in high school is suddenly presumed guilty of sexual assault, we'll be an ugly new place in this country. I got a weak stomach, whether it's with beer or with spicy food or anything. No, we drank beer, and so did I think the vast majority of people our age at the time. But in any event, we drank beer and still do. So whatever,
What do you...
We drank beer. We liked beer.
What do you consider to be too many beers?
I don't know. Whatever the chart says, a blood alcohol chart.
You said that there were times in high school when people might have had too many beers on occasion. Does that include you?
Sure.
Okay.
The exchange with Klobuchar could be regarded by many as a low point in the Kavanaugh hearings. As damaging as the Ford allegations were, as excruciating as it had been to watch her, and as exercised as Kavanaugh had been up to then, nothing had appeared quite so impertinent as him turning the tables on a senior female senator who had just opened up about her own family history with alcohol.
Judge, have you ever passed out from drinking?
Passed out would be... No, but I've gone to sleep, but I've never blacked out. That's the allegation, and that's wrong. I like beer. I don't know if you do.
Okay.
But do you like beer, Senator, or not? Senator, what do you like to drink?
Have you ever blacked out? You haven't answered that.
I like beer. I don't know if you do.
Next.
What do you like to drink?
Excuse me? Was there ever a time when you drank so much that you couldn't remember what happened or part of what happened the night before?
You're asking about, blackout. I don't know. Have you?
Did you answer the question, Judge? That's not happened. Is that your answer?
Yeah, and I'm curious if you have.
I have no drinking problem, Judge.
Yeah, nor do I.
Okay.
So you said that through all these years that are in question, you were a virgin?
That's correct. I did not have sexual intercourse or anything close to sexual intercourse in high school or for many years thereafter.
Never had sexual intercourse with anyone in high school?
Correct.
And through what years in college, since we're probing into your personal life here?
Many years after. I'll leave it at that.
Now, you've talked about your yearbook. In your yearbook, you talked about drinking and sexual exploits, did you not?
Kate and Robin hold up large poster boards with the pages of Brett's yearbook and a copy of his calendar page from July 1982. On them are a picture of him from 1981 and a series of memories written by Brett Kavanaugh, his senior year of high school.
Well, I'd like to now ask you a few questions about your calendar and yearbook page. Judge, have you, I don't know if it's boofed or boofed. How do you pronounce that?
That refers to flatulence. We were 16.
Okay. And so when your friend Mark Judge said the same, put the same thing in his yearbook page back to you, he had the same meaning? It was flatulence?
I don't know what he did, but that's my recollection. We want to talk about flatulence at age 16 on a yearbook page. I'm game.
You mentioned, I think, the Renate or Renata. I don't know how you pronounce that. That's a proper name of an individual you know?
Renata.
Renata. It's spelled with an E at the end, R-E-N-A-T-E. Is that, is this the Renata referenced in song in Mark Judge's book?
You would have to ask him. I don't know about that.
Okay. And then after her name is the word alumnius. What does the word alumnius mean in that context?
She was a great friend of ours. A bunch of us went to dances with her. She hung out with us as a group. The media circus that has been generated by this thought and reported that it referred to sex. It did not. Never had any, as she herself said on the record, any kind of sexual interaction with her. And I'm sorry how that's been misinterpreted, and sorry about that, because she's a good person. And to have her name dragged through this hearing is a joke and really an embarrassment.
Devil's Triangle?
Drinking game.
How's it played?
3 glasses in a triangle.
And?
You ever played quarters?
Nope.
Okay, it's a quarters game.
And Doherty's?
As you can tell from my calendar, she had a party on the 4th of July in the beach in Delaware.
And there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 F's in front of the 4th of July. What does that signify, if anything?
One of our friends, Squi, when he said the F word starting at a young age, had kind of a wind up to the F word. Kind of a, and then the word would come out. And when we were 15, we thought that was funny. And it became an inside joke for how he would say, and I won't repeat it here, for the F word.
Referring to Georgetown versus Louisville, and
you want any more on the
No.
Senator, let me take a step back and explain high school. I was number 1 in the class.
And I thought.
No.
I thought we were in the Senate.
You've got this all. I'm going to talk about my high school.
The whole question, I thought we were in the Senate. He can't.
I'm going to talk about my high school record if you're going to sit here and mock me.
Let him answer.
I think we were all very fair to Dr. Ford. Shouldn't we be just as fair to Judge Kavanaugh?
I busted my butt in academics. I always tried to do the best I could. As I recall, I finished 1 in the class, first in, freshman and junior year, right at the top with Steve, Clark, and Eddie. We were always kind of in the mix. I played sports. I was captain of the varsity basketball team. I was wide receiver and defensive back on the football team. I ran track in the spring of '82 to try to get faster. I did my service projects at the school, which involved going to the soup kitchen downtown. Let me finish! And going to tutor intellectually disabled kids at the Rockville Library. With the church. And yes, we got together with our friends.
Does this reflect what you are? Does this yearbook reflect your
Senator,
focus on academics and your respect for women? That's easy. Yes or no? You don't have to filibuster the answer. Does it reflect your focus on academics?
I already said the yearbook in my opening statement. The yearbook, obviously, the yearbook, as I said in my opening statement, was something where the students and editors made a decision to treat some of it as farce and some of it as exaggeration, some of it as celebrating things that don't reflect the things that were really the central part of our school. Yes, we went to parties though. Yes, of course, we went to parties, and the yearbook page describes that and kind of makes fun of it. And as if we want to sit here and talk about whether a Supreme Court nomination should be based on a high school yearbook page, I think that's taken us to a new level of absurdity.
Well, we got a filibuster, but not a single answer. Please, Judge.
I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, a Jesuit high school, where I was focused on academics and athletics, going to church every Sunday at Little Flower, working on my service projects and friendships, friendship with my fellow classmates, and friendship with girls from the local all-girls Catholic schools. And yes, there were parties and the drinking age was 18. And yes, the seniors were legal and had beer there. And yes, people might have had too many beers on occasion, and people generally in high school, I think all of us have probably done things we look back on in high school and regret or cringe a bit, but that's not what we're talking
Judge Kavanaugh transforms into Brett and joins the group and begins lift weights. Brett takes his place at the chest press bench and the other boys surround him, spotting and encouraging him. Throughout the scene, they pound a few beers each, stacking the empties into a pyramid.
Ah, nice, man. A few more sessions like this, and we might have a chance at beating Landon Prep next weekend.
As if we would lose anyways. Those pussies are going down. We'll have a way stronger defensive line after we hit it in training camp.
I need a Squi. Go and get us some from the cooler.
Why don't you go get it?
I don't even know if you could lift that. The lid is pretty heavy.
Shut up, Mark. I can't go lifting today because I was with Renata Schroeder last night and she fucked up my back. I'm injured.
The boys listen in to Tobin's tale.
She was blasted and dragged me into the closet. She couldn't get it fast enough. Her tits are like two perfect stress balls. And the way Coach has been riding our asses, I was stressed. No girl can resist this.
Even though they all try to.
Squi hits him in the arm.
Hey, you know what they say. If you've got a boner,
better call Schroeder.
Well, if you're so tight with Hoder, she's coming with you to Mark's tonight, right? Huh? Yeah?
I don't know, man, but I hope she isn't. Been there, done that. I want to see what other Holton hotties want a piece of this.
Leland Ingram was all over me at the pool today. I'm going to give her a ride tonight. Maybe even the ride of her life.
Is she bringing any of the cheerleading girls to the party?
Brett, you really think with all of us there you're getting any tail? I bet you haven't even seen tits.
Hey, fuck you, man. I've seen tits.
Yeah, your dad's Playboys. How do you ever suspect to get sophisticated Yale chicks if you're still a little virgin?
Whatever. High school chicks are lame anyways. I don't want to go through all the bullshit get to know you talk, you know? Chicks always bore me to death before I even get the chance.
Don't worry, buddy. I'll help you find an easy chick at the party. Now, hand me another Squi. I could probably pound it before we get to Tobin's.
Grab me one, too.
They add their empties to the pyramid and take their seats, laughing with each other. Lights out. Scene 10, the party. Committee meeting room.
Dr. Ford, no matter what happens with this hearing today, no matter what happens to this nomination, I know, and I hear from so many in my own state of Vermont, there are millions of victims and survivors out there who have been inspired by your courage. I am. Bravery is contagious. Indeed, that's the driving force behind the Me Too movement. And you sharing your story is going to have a lasting positive impact on so many survivors in our country. We owe you a debt of gratitude for that, Doctor. In your statement this morning, you have told us everything you remember about the day leading up to that.
Yes.
Let me ask you a few questions to make sure you've thought of everything, okay?
So when we rehearsed, and I turned my camera on.
You indicated that you were at the country club swimming that day.
That's my best estimate of how this could have happened.
Okay. And when you say best estimate, is that based on the fact that you went there pretty much every day?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall prior to getting there, so I'm only talking about up to the gathering, had you had anything to drink?
Not at all.
Were you on any sort of medication?
None.
Do you recall knowing before you went who was going to be at the gathering?
I recall that expecting that Mark Judge and Lehland would be at the gathering.
Okay, and do you recall an expectation that Brett Kavanaugh would be there?
I don't recall whether or not I expected that.
Well, then let's go back to the incident. What is the strongest memory you have? The strongest memory of the incident, something that you cannot forget? Take whatever time you need.
Indelible in the hippocampus is the laughter, the laugh. The uproarious laughter between the two, and they're having fun at my expense.
You've never forgotten that laughter. You've never forgotten them laughing at you. They were laughing with each other, and you were the object of that laughter?
I was, underneath one of them while the two laughed. Two friends having a really good time with one another. Can we take a break?
Of course. Let's take a 10-minute break. Do you need anything?
No, just please excuse me.
I'll exit except Christine.
One evening that summer, after a long day of diving at the club, I attended a small gathering at the house in the Bethesda area. There were 4 boys I remember specifically being there: Brett Kavanaugh, Mark Judge, a boy named PJ, and one other boy whose name I cannot recall. I also remember my friend Lehland attending. I do not remember all of the details of how that gathering came together, but like many that summer, it was almost surely a spur-of-the-moment gathering. I don't have all the answers, and I don't remember as much as I would like to, but the details about that night that bring me here today are the ones I will never forget. They have been seared into my memory and have haunted me episodically as an adult. When I got to the small gathering, people were drinking beer in a small living room, family room type area on the first floor of the house. I drank 1 beer. Brett and Mark were visibly drunk. Early in the evening, I went up a narrow set of stairs leading from the living room to the second floor to use the restroom. When I got to the top of the stairs, I was pushed from behind into a bedroom across from the bathroom. I couldn't see who pushed me. Brett and Mark came into the bedroom and locked the doors behind them.
80s pop music starts to play quietly, progressively getting louder as she tells her testimony.
There was music playing in the bedroom. It was turned up louder by either Brett or Mark once we were in the room. I was pushed onto the bed, and Brett got on top of me. He began running his hands over my body and grinding into me. I yelled, hoping that someone downstairs might hear me, and I tried to get away from him, but his weight was heavy. Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes. He had a hard time because he was inebriated and because I was wearing a 1-piece bathing suit underneath my clothing. I believed he was going to rape me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me. Both Brett and Mark were drunkenly laughing during the attack. They seemed to be having a really good time. Mark seemed ambivalent at times, urging Brett on, and at times telling him to stop. A couple of times I made eye contact with Mark and thought he might try to help me. But he did not. During this assault, Mark came over and jumped on the bed twice while Brett was on top of me, and the last time he did this, we toppled over and Brett was no longer on top of me. I was able to get up and run out of the room. Directly across from the bedroom was a small bathroom. I ran inside the bathroom and locked the door and waited until I heard Brett and Mark leave the bedroom, laughing and walking loudly down the narrow stairway, pinballing off the walls on the way down. I waited, and when I did not hear them come back up the stairs, I left the bathroom, went down the same stairwell through the living room, and left the house. I remember being on the street and feeling this enormous. Brett's assault on me anyone's at age 15 was in a house present myself because Brett did not rape me.
When she felt enough time had passed, Christine unlocked the bathroom door, went downstairs, and left the house. She suspects that she grabbed Lehland, who probably drove her home. The details of that hasty departure are no longer clear.
The return home to her parents' house in Potomac has stuck with her, however. Christine says that her father was waiting when she got home. Paula was watching TV in a room upstairs. Christine was fearful that her appearance would reveal that something bad had happened involving boys and beer. She was too ashamed and afraid to tell her parents about it. She also didn't want to be grounded. Christine made it past her father to her bedroom without arousing suspicion. Relief washed over her. Because she hadn't been raped, she reasoned that nothing of consequence had happened.
Lights out. Scene 11, defending. Enter Senators Brett and Christine.
Dr. Ford, I'd like to join my colleagues who have thanked you for coming forward today. By coming forward, you have inserted the question of character into this nomination, and hopefully back into American life, and rightly so. We should be made to face the question of who it is we are putting in positions of power and decision-making in this country. We should look at the question square in the face. Does character matter? I believe they do, and I believe the reaction we have seen to this coverage right now and your courage all over this country shows us that we're not alone. You're not alone. That women and men all across America are disgusted and sick and tired of the way basic human decency has been driven from our public life. The president admits on tape to assaulting women. He separates children from their parents. He takes basic healthcare protections from those who need them most. He nominates and stands behind a man who stands credibly accused of a horrible act. I, again, want to thank you for coming forward.
One of my colleagues, who I have a lot of respect for, and I do consider him a friend, went to the Senate floor and spoke truth to both sides of the political aisle. Senator Flake said yesterday, "This is a lifetime appointment, and this is said to be a deliberative body. In the interest of due diligence and fairness, her claims must be fully aired and considered." I agree with him. But you've asked for things that would give a full airing, from corroborating witnesses to be called. You've submitted to an intrusive polygraph test. Can you answer for me, how do you feel that all the things that could have been done thoroughly to help this deliberative body have not been honored in this so-called investigation?
I wish that I could be more helpful, and that others could be more helpful, and that we could collaborate in a way that would get at more information.
Dr. Ford, first of all, just so we can level set, you know you are not on trial. You are not on trial. You are sitting here before members of the United States Senate Judiciary Committee because you had the courage to come forward, because, as you have said, you believed it was your civic duty. I was struck in your testimony by what you indicated as your intention when you first let anyone associated with these hearings know about it. You told your husband and therapist, two of the most intimate of your confidants, and you told them years ago about this assault. I believe that you are doing that because you love this country, and I believe history will show that you are a true profile in courage at this moment, in a time in the history of our country.
Exit Christine.
And I thank you.
Judge Kavanaugh, I'm going to give you a last opportunity right here, right in front of God and country. I want you to look me in the eye. Are Dr. Ford's allegations true?
They are not to me. I have not questioned that she might have been sexually assaulted at some point in her life by someone, someplace. But as to me, I've never done this. Never done this to her or to anyone else. And I've talked to you about what I was doing that summer of 1982. But I'm telling you, I've never done this to anyone, including her.
Are Mrs. Ramirez's allegations about you true?
Those are not. No. No, none of the witnesses in the room support that. If that had happened, that would have been the talk of campus in our freshman dorm. The New York Times reported that as recently as last week, she was calling other classmates seeking to, well, I'm not going to characterize it, but calling classmates last week and just seemed very, I'll just stop there. But that's not true. That's not true.
Are Ms. Swetnick's allegations made by Mr. Avenatti about you true?
Those are not true. Never met her. Don't know who she is. There's a letter released within 2 hours of that breaking yesterday from, I think, 60 people who knew me in high school, men and women, who said it was, their words, nonsense. Totally, the whole thing that totally ridiculous.
None of these allegations are true.
Correct.
No doubt in your mind?
Zero. I'm 100% certain.
Not even a scintilla?
Not a scintilla. 100% certain, Senator.
You swear to God?
I swear to God.
That's all I have, Judge.
I'm sorry, but I can't sit here any longer. I have to speak my piece. What you Democrats want to do is destroy this guy's life, hold this seat open, and hope you win in 2020. And you've got nothing to apologize for. I hope you're on the Supreme Court. That's exactly where you should be. And I hope that the American people will see through this charade. And I wish you well. And I intend to vote for you, and I hope everybody who's fair-minded will. This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics. And if you really wanted to know the truth, you sure as hell wouldn't have done what you've done to this guy. Are you a gang rapist?
No.
I cannot imagine what you and your family have gone through. Boy, you all want power. God, I hope you never get it. I hope the American people can see through this sham. That you knew about it and you held it. You had no intention of protecting Dr. Ford. None. She's as much of a victim as you are. God, I hate to say it because my colleagues have been my friends. But let me tell you, when it comes to this, you're looking for a fair process? You came to the wrong town at the wrong time, my friend. If you vote no, you are legitimizing the most despicable thing I have seen in my time in politics. Do you consider this a job interview?
I've been through a process of advice and consent under the Constitution, which...
Would you say you've been through hell?
I've been through hell and then some.
This is not a job interview.
Yes, this is hell. This is a circus. The consequences will extend long past my nomination. The consequences will be with us for decades. This grotesque and coordinated character assassination will dissuade competent and good people of all political persuasions from serving our country. You'll never get me to quit.
Kavanaugh was more controlled by this point. He seemed almost exhausted by the day's events. Or he may have been encouraged by the sense that the Republicans were stepping up on his behalf, shifting the hearing's dynamics in his favor. Kavanaugh didn't need to argue his case as strongly anymore. His Republican supporters were doing it for him. Where the judge had started the day looking like a villain, now he was looking like a victim.
Lights out. Scene 12, results. Robin and Kate address the audience.
As reporters, it is not for us to opine on whether Kavanaugh's youthful misdeeds or angry testimony should have blocked him from the Supreme Court. That question was left to the president, who supported Kavanaugh's confirmation, the Senate, which voted to approve him, and ultimately, American voters, who showed their feelings at the ballot box in impeachment petitions. Some thought the mere possibility that Kavanaugh had assaulted Ford and others, allegations that they felt were bolstered by the stories of heavy drinking and chauvinistic yearbook boasts, meant Kavanaugh should have been replaced.
Others point out that our juvenile justice system is built on the long-held belief that a young person's bad decisions shouldn't haunt them for years to come. That is why most juvenile records and many juvenile court proceedings are kept largely confidential.
The country was deeply and bitterly divided on Kavanaugh. In the days after the polarizing hearings, 48% of Americans opposed his confirmation, and about 42% supported it, according to a Quinnipiac poll. Arguments about Ford's motivations and Kavanaugh's performance split families and friends. Those standoffs spilled into the halls of Capitol Hill, where longtime staffers found themselves in the most poisonous environment they could remember, with colleagues taking their disagreements over the confirmation process personally.
I know how this story ends. We all do. Brett Kavanaugh was awarded a seat on the most prestigious court in our country. He is the best they could offer us. I kept waiting for him to speak these words.
Exit Robin and Kate. Enter Brett.
I'm not proud of everything I did when I was young. I doubt any of us are. But growing up means learning from our mistakes, in part, so we can help our children grow into responsible adults. When I look back now, I realize that my friends and I reveled in our own privilege. We were male, white, rich, and destined to have limitless opportunities laid before us. We drank too much. We treated the young women we knew like objects or potential conquests or the butt of jokes. We certainly didn't empathize with them. If we had, we would have understood how our own behavior made them feel, how it could make them feel vulnerable, degraded, even victimized. We would have understood that those feelings can stay with a person for life and be a source of pain and anguish, even if you were never the victim of a crime. We can look back now and say that we can't expect that kind of empathy from a teenager. But it's exactly what we should expect. Even if we weren't capable of it then, today's teenagers can be, if we use our own failings to teach them to be better than we were. That's what I've tried to do as an adult.
But he didn't say any of that. Ultimately, we combined our notebooks with our common sense and came to believe an utterly human narrative, that Ford and Ramirez were mistreated by Kavanaugh as a teenager, and that Kavanaugh, over the next 35 years, became a seemingly better person. We came to this complicated and contradictory and perhaps unsatisfying conclusion based on the facts as we found them. In the course of our 10-month investigation, we conducted hundreds of interviews with principal players in Kavanaugh's education, career, and confirmation. Senator Dianne Feinstein issued the statement saying,
Kavanaugh's confirmation had put women's reproductive rights, civil rights, environmental protections, workers' rights, the ability to implement gun safety rules, and the ability to hold presidents accountable at risk for a generation. Today is a sad day. Tomorrow we must pick ourselves up and keep fighting.
I was left with the feeling that he got away with something again. Life is not a straight line, and many times we wish it were. You take steps forward and you want to keep taking more steps in order to make progress, but there are always setbacks along the way.
You can't look at justice as just the confirmation vote. There is so much good that came out of it. There's so much more good to come.
Lights out. End of play.
My fellow dramaturg Kobi and the director Tom to come on as we do a talk back for I Like Beer. Go. Okay, everyone here. Everyone got their mics on?
Yes.
Great.
Yep, good to go.
First things first, fantastic job, Jayne.
Thank you. Thank you. Everyone did such a wonderful job. That was so awesome to watch. I appreciate it.
And so we're going. The point of a talkback, just to, in case people don't know, is to provide more information from the director and the writer, and to facilitate questions from the audience to them as well, for further development or just for understanding. And so we're just going to start with a question for Jayne. What led you to pick the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearing and turn it into a play?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be in a play writing class last semester with Tim Slover. And in that class, we had talked about methods of developing ideas for shows. And one thing that he had said or had taught us that stuck with me is like an important event that you think needs to be seen from the stage. And this immediately came to my mind. It was something in politics that had captivated everyone for a few days and was soon brushed into the chaos of everything else going on. And I really, truly thought that seeing this show again in the light of live theater would give it kind of the strength that it needs, that it has on its own, and showcase the impacts that it did have on the nation.
Great.
Okay, going on to our director, to Tom. Here's what I think that we're all wondering. Obviously, we have to always constantly adapt to changing plans and how these things are done. This reading was obviously no different. So what challenges did you face directing through this entirely different medium? And also, how did you overcome those challenges?
I mean, well, besides the fact that we're not in person, which, I mean, I have no idea how to direct over a video platform, which I'm not sure that anybody else does actually have that skill set. But for this, I think how we tried to overcome it is to make two very distinct worlds between the Senate chambers and the flashbacks. And I feel like that was fairly successful for this purposes. And thanks to Jayne for giving us such a clear division between the two in the script. Really, I just did what was written. So I think that's kind of how we overcame.
I think that this was a journey for everyone in our whole class to overcome playwrights. It was hard to, from our perspective, to kind of change what we had made for a very specific type of reading and adapt. But I think that we did a great job, and I could not have done it without Tom. Ever. It's great.
And then just going back to Jayne for another question. Were there times that you had difficulties tackling a subject that people were immensely invested in emotionally, physically in some parts, protesting, and putting all that aside to focus on the source material and avoid the political aspects of it?
Yeah, well, obviously the show does delve into the political aspects of it, along with the personal aspects. So, the things that are personal to a survivor are addressed in this show, along with the general well-being of the nation as a whole that this decision, affected. So I don't think I would say I set them aside as far as I decided where both were able to be used most effectively, and where both were used in the hearing themselves as a tactic. I think that this show is about both, and it is important to relay both those stories because they're integral to this whole experience.
Mm. And now I think a question to everyone in the audience who's here for the talkback, actually. I'm already seeing some wonderful responses here. But I think it'd be good for our playwright to know as well. Was the play structured in a way that you were able to view both perspectives clearly? And if not, let us know your opinions. Did the play appear to lean too heavily into one side or the other, or what would make it more clear? I think that'd be wonderful feedback for our creative team.
And also, if you want to just type that in the chat, or if you want to type in the chat, we'll give you guys a couple seconds.
Of course.
Is this where the Jeopardy theme song plays?
Yes, it would be.
Well, and in the meantime, I think another question for Jayne. One that I think we actually had that came up in our own class when this happened. But where did you come up with the idea to not have individual senators named and to have them be broken up by number instead?
Yeah, I really wanted to play into the partisanship of this trial, that it was so divided along party lines that, excuse me, that I didn't want to do all the senators by name because I think that would have gotten too into their personal politics. There was a lot of controversy within the senators on the committee, and it was just too much to put in. I wanted to keep the story really focused on Brett and Christine, but I did want to highlight how split the opinions were on this case. So I decided to put them in two separate odd and even categories. That way it made it so that the verbatim of the show could still be enacted and that it could highlight the division between the party lines.
While we wait for another question, or while we wait for people to type up their questions from the question that Jayne had, just to reiterate one more time, was the play structured in a way that you were able to view both perspectives clearly? If not, did the play appear to lean too heavily into Ford or Kavanaugh? My question is that Tom, how would you envision this, and how would you direct it as a full-scale production?
I think one of the things I would most want to focus on is I want it to be really grounded in truth, but also elevate how absurd some of the things that actually happened in the actual trial were, or the hearing were, rather. And so, like, the fact that, like, we have teenage boys pounding beers, I picture that happening right on the Senate floor. I think it's very funny. I don't know. A lot of the stuff that I would have done with the show, I think Jayne had already put in the script. We had many conversations about like what we would do in an exploration period, that if we would have had one before the virus kind of took over our lives. And a lot of the stuff that we did talk about was already kind of transferred into the script.
Okay. Wow, all the questions are coming in. Which one was the first one? Do you know what that was, Kobi?
I think
Sure.
Tim had a question that was first.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if people want to unmute their microphones as well.
There's a raise hand option too.
Yeah.
Go to reactions, and then we can kind of do that more orderly.
Yeah,
please
but
feel free.
Yeah, but Tim's question, you got that, Kobi?
There we are. All right. Yes, from our lovely Tim Slover. This one's for Jayne. Did you find yourself more sympathetic to Christine or Brett than you were before you did the research?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason that this event was the subject of my play is because it affected me when it happened. And I was very sympathetic for Christine. In most cases of sexual assault, I'm very sympathetic for whoever the survivor is. I truly believe all women. The Me Too movement, it has so much validity. But in the process of researching this, I did really try to make an effort to be sympathetic towards Brett Kavanaugh, and the possibility that it was a false accusation. I did want to give that some credit, but I think that in my research, it became more and more evident that my sympathy should lie with Christine. There were a lot of other elements at play that kind of stacked this, I believe, for Brett Kavanaugh. And so even though I did become sympathetic to both characters, I hope that my story told you how I feel.
Great. And then just for that question that we had before about the aspects of relying to either side, Hiram said, I think it illustrated each side wonderfully. Even with my own previous opinions on the issue, I felt myself almost swayed by the other side. How's that to both of you guys? Does that make you feel good about this? Does it make you want to pursue it, or
I think
any other
that's
feelings?
wonderful. That is a compliment to me, so I appreciate that. I think that is great that you were able to see from both sides of the story.
Tom, any feelings on that as well?
Yeah, I feel like Jayne's script does a really good job at illustrating what she feels about the situation. And I think that came across very evidently.
Great.
I think here's a good one as well. First of all, I think if we're going in order, I have a question that says, Jayne, do you have any plans to submit your play to festivals or competitions? It needs to be seen by all the folks who didn't watch the trial.
Thank you. Well, this is my trial run right here. Good feedback means maybe, I've loved this workshop process in creating this play and doing it in a community setting. And this is not where this play ends, I think, is the bottom line of that story. There's too much good work that has gone into this, so I'd love to.
Oh, hold on. And I lost the one I was going to say. Hold on a second. Oh yeah. So another question was asked. Why? Joseph is curious. Why did you decide to use the New York Times reporters to play the part as the narrators?
Good question.
In my research of the trial, I had come across their book, and in reading it, it gave such a highlight to what that summer of 1982 was like for the two of them, that it really sparked the main idea for the show of doing those flashbacks for me. So in reading their findings, I said, this is what it's got to be, and it's got to be told by the people who have done the research to give it validity. So I did want to choose them as real people to instill the verbatim and keep it accurate, while also having that that element to be able to guide that through the show.
Cool.
All right. Let's see. Ooh, a question for Tom. And that is, what was the experience from your end working to maintain the real-life expression of these people and what they said, while also encouraging the dramatic interpretation from the actors? And going along with that for Jayne, what was the process like for you as well to pull the reality of the situation and interpret it dramatically?
So we didn't, since like none of the senators really had a specific, well, I guess they all had kind of had people they were tied to, but that's not something we really focused on. It was kind of more focusing on the argument of what the person was saying rather than trying to embody a certain person, just kind of like living the truth of that person and maybe characterizing the idea of a political official. But quite honestly, we had about a 3-hour rehearsal process. So a lot of what you saw was the actors just taking the skills that they had themselves and us kind of like helping them shape it into what we wanted for the final product. So really, it was mostly on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just add to that. The actors did most of the characterization themselves. I was the only person that had this sense of knowledge of what this trial was really like. And so allowing them the liberty to be able to embody what they, like how they would be those senators and how they would be in those positions and in those characters was up to them, and they did a wonderful job. Doing a verbatim show was hard for me because I wanted to add my own elements to it, and I wanted it to be something that that highlighted the absurdity, but I did want to keep it true. So pulling that line between reality and theatricality was like the whole thing for the show. That was the trouble the whole time. But it was a fun line to walk.
The one thing we really harp on though was Kavanaugh sniffing. That
Drinking water. We needed that to be.
Yes, I did notice that.
I believe one senator had a pitcher.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
yes.
kills me.
Full
That kills me.
picture.
Put out a picture.
So, because I know that in theater we are also supposed to look at the theatrical aspect, and while using verbatim is extremely useful, you decide to not just have Keira, who played Christine, just sit there and read out, or at least in the stage directions, sit there and read out the how the statement, but actually have a more emotional, theatrical, in-depth idea and parts of it. What led you to have that in there?
Yeah, I wanted Christine and her testimony to be a lot more theatrical than Brett's, because I think that his kind of spoke for itself in what I was trying to get across, which is his temperament, his avoidance, and other things. They kind of were best shown through verbatim, while hers, I wanted to place somewhere other than a courtroom at times to show a more personal connection to her telling this story. It's one thing to stand in front of people and share your story versus defending yourself. Those are two very different experiences, and I wanted to separate them as far as I could using the theatrical elements.
So moving on, we have another great question, but I think this is a good follow-up to it, or I guess a preamble to it. Someone says, did Kavanaugh really say "I love beer" that many times? Which Sydney replied to, yes. Yes, he did.
Yes, I think the final count that I had of the trial was something like, he said, "I like beer" upwards of 170 times.
Whew.
Yeah.
But that's a great segue into this other question that we had, which we kind of touched on, but maybe we want to hear a bit more about, which is what was the process like in trying to find the moments of comedic relief and absurdity in the play, right? Because I think that's really where a lot of the comedy shines, with the water and the so many different kinds, saying beer.
Yeah, and those were things that, when I first started researching this show, I really just sat down and watched 11 hours of a Senate hearing, and I had to make my own fun a little bit, because it was hard to watch. It was really long, and it was a hard subject. And so when I caught those moments of like, that is so funny, that gave me joy in the brief second that was like an absurd thing, I tried to really note those and then put them into my script as much as possible. And I found that they were universal. The sniffing and the drinking water and all these little antics made it kind of evident the story that was going on in a weird way.
And I think we have time for one more question from Charlotte. She asks, what was the process like trying to find these moments of comic relief and highlighting what was the process like in trying to find those moments of comedic relief and highlighting the absurdity? Which is a good follow-up to that question.
Mm-hmm. The process of it was kind of I did want to play on what people knew about the trial, the yearbooks and the beer and the outrage. And I did want to play into the snippets of media that people would have known about this. But then also find those other elements that were a little bit more absurd that maybe were dismissed. So it was tricky trying to pick those out, but they did kind of come to light on their own for me.
Okay. Great. Thank Jayne, Tom. Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. It was a fantastic reading. Everyone was amazing. Anything, Kobi, else that you want to add?
No, I think that's wonderful. I think people had some great questions, some really good feedback, some very kind words. And thank you all for the work that you both put in, Jayne and Tom both.
Appreciate
Absolutely. I really appreciate this process. This is the last show from our new play workshop. So just a huge shout out to everyone who's been in the class, our wonderful professors.
Yeah, thank you to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. And you know where we'll be. We'll be at the University of Utah starting again in the fall. And next spring, there will be another new plays workshop. So if you're a student, come join us. We'd love to have you, all of you. And if you're not, I hope you'll come back for the readings again next year. It's a great delight to do these. And thank you all very much for your time. Have a great night.